The Tim Powers Show will be right back. This is The Tim Powers Show on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Well, last week, the all-party committee that had been studying mental health and addictions in the province came forward with their recommendations. They made 54 of them in their report called Towards Recovery. It's an important report. It's an important issue. It's always been an important issue to me for a whole variety of reasons, and it is for my next guest. And with me, I have Dr. Janine Hubbard, who's the president, now take a deep breath, I'll read the full name, of the Association of Psychology Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, I don't need CBT for getting that out, Janine, but what did you what did you think of the report now that it's out? A lot of hard work went into it. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I'm really pleased that it did see the light of day. We first presented to this committee nearly 2 years ago. So I know that it's gone through a lot of time and a change in government. So I give them a lot of credit for all three parties continuing to persist with it. I would say it's very inclusive. I'd also say it's very ambitious. Mm-hmm. There are some very attainable goals, and there are some very aspirational goals in there.
Well, before we get to those, let me just tell the audience what the health minister said. He basically summed up his response into three areas. He wanted to move mental health away from the shadows. He said that we need to move mental health care out of institutions and into the community. And the third part, we need to put some money into the system to do it. So on your scale of aspirational versus achievable versus ambitious, where does the money part fit first? Because so much of what the government can actually do is dependent on what they actually spend.
Absolutely. Well, we're really encouraged because at the moment, mental health encompasses about 5.7% of the Newfoundland and Labrador health budget, and this would take it up to approximately 9%. That's far more consistent with the percentage that we've been advocating for years. That's consistent with many other Commonwealth countries, such as the UK. That's always been sort of the benchmark, is around 9% of healthcare spending.
Any idea what that, can I just ask you a quick question off that? Any idea yet? I mean, I realize the report only came out last week, but what that spending might actually look like? Have you gotten any suggestion from the government or any recommendation as to what that might appear like?
I think it's going to be multifaceted for sure. I think there's a few quick fixes that are going to come along, and then there's going to be some major institutional things. I mean, two of the recommendations that came out were basically rebuilding Her Majesty's Penitentiary and rebuilding the Waterford, looking different than they do currently, but some major infrastructure. One of the things that I think is helping to boost this, and the timing of this has worked really well, is that Newfoundland and Labrador signed on to the health accord with the federal government, which is finally actually giving the province a percentage of money that is targeted and must be targeted towards mental health.
And that's a key thing. Every province is arguing for this, and I think we can all make the argument there's never enough money that is actually being spent on mental health, but the public opinion climate is such now that more is being spent and people understand why that is happening. What you talked earlier, what are some of those ambitious targets that you worry about the government perhaps being challenged to make from this particular report?
Well, I'm encouraged by the idea of decreasing wait times because at the moment, absolutely, people are waiting 18 months, 2 years to try to get in to see a psychologist, for example. And we know that that's not acceptable or sustainable on a long-term basis. The concern I would have is making sure that in committing to decreasing wait times, they're making sure that people are accessing appropriate services. For example, one of the recommendations are some single session models. Single sessions can be wonderful for some people. That may be all that they need, but I want to make sure that those who need more intensive treatments are also being offered those more intensive treatments. And also at the same time, making sure that there is an increase in personnel because we want to make sure that we're not just increasing the workload of existing staff. I do credit them for acknowledging that they want to address issues of compassion fatigue and burnout in the existing staff in the province. So I give them credit for that.
What about this notion? Is this one of the quick targets that can be achieved? And Dr. Haggie highlighted this, moving the current mental health services prison system provision from justice and public safety to health and community services. Is that a good thing?
Again, I think as unfortunately, like a lot of these things, it's going to come out in the wash when we see the details. They've promised us a much more detailed report coming out in June, outlining some of the more specifics. So I think I'm going to have to defer comment on that one until we see the plan in June.
What isn't here that you wish was here? And that's not to take away from the good work that's being done, but was there something glaring that was missed or something important that you think that also needs to be kept in this discussion as the government focuses on how it will address mental health provision in Newfoundland and Labrador?
I think they have done an excellent job of keeping it very comprehensive. They've tried to work to address some of the underpinnings as well, including things like looking at poverty, looking at still shelter and housing. Those are going to be some important things. The one thing that I'm hoping will be addressed, it's not addressed directly at the moment, is early assessment and early intervention, partly because it's a topic near and dear to my own heart clinically, but we have all kinds of discussions about being able to offer services, but we need to make sure that individuals are getting the right services. So we want to make sure that there is a thorough assessment happening early on to make sure that they're being referred for the appropriate treatment.
Now, one of the things that I find fascinating in the psychology profession, which may have not been the case when you started doing your graduate work and working in the field, but is becoming abundantly clear, is psychologists, psychiatrists, other mental health workers are also having to become public advocates. And I make that comment having read a comment this past week from Emily Curran, who has been a major healthcare and mental health advocate and has said that this is all well and good, but we have to keep pushing here. We have to keep on top of it because government's priorities change, healthcare priorities change. In your role, how much of your work now is about advocacy and how important is ongoing advocacy?
You're absolutely right. There was absolutely no part of my graduate training that trained me how to become an advocate, although we're certainly now including that as part of our graduate curriculum for some of our psychology residents. If nothing else, we give them a seminar once a year talking about advocacy, so we're getting it in there a little bit. I think it is going to be very important to continue to monitor where this is going with the government. They've promised us some timelines. They've promised some accountability. But I do think it's going to be really important for groups such as APNL and all of the other advocacy groups in the province to continue to keep monitoring this so it doesn't wind up another study that winds up on a shelf.
Now, often with advocacy groups and having worked and continue to work in this industry, I know you're often stronger when you're together, and what governments will try and do sometimes strategically and tactically is to split governments apart. Is there a unity of purpose among the variety of different groups that have contributed to this report and will keep a spotlight on the government?
That's certainly the sense that I've been getting. I was at the release on Friday there, and certainly talking to a number of my colleagues in the room, I think there's a real, I would describe it as cautious optimism in terms of where we go from here. But again, I think there's a lot of let's see the details. I think there's a lot of us waiting for June, waiting to see some of the specifics.
What does success look like for you in 5 years or 10 years from now if this report is picked up? What does our mental health and wellness system in Newfoundland and Labrador look like if people have acted to the extent that the intentions of today suggest they will?
Oh, really good comment, because this has been one of the difficulties in trying to advocate for mental health services is because you don't see the payoff immediately. Reason why governments have often struggled, because you don't see the payoff during their political term. You're going to see the payoff 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. So that piece is going to be difficult. My goal would be seeing individuals getting the right service as quickly as is needed for them. And that is going to look very different. Sometimes, yes, it's going to be coming in and chatting with me as a psychologist. Sometimes it might be having access to an online intervention. In some cases, it may require hospitalization. We need to make sure that we have the full range of services available with the minimal wait times possible.
Now, just before I let you go, how are your peers feeling? Are they feeling, you talked about burnout earlier, and this question is, do we have enough trained professionals in this field of service? I know in Ontario, where I am today, there's a shortage. And in just about every province, there's a shortage of psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers. I assume that's generally true in Newfoundland, is it?
That is indeed. I will say that's one area that Newfoundland and Labrador has made real strides in the last few years. I have to give a lot of credit. MUN has developed the first English language PsyD program. That's a doctorate in clinical psychology. So for the first time, we are training our own in-house doctorate-level clinical psychologists, which has made a huge difference. That, and we have increased the number of residency spots here in the province so that we're even attracting psychologists, budding psychologists from other provinces who come and finish off their training with us and decide to stay. So we're making some gains here, but absolutely we need a whole lot more.
Well, as somebody who entered the mental health and wellness system 20-odd years ago, I can attest to lots of progress being made. There's lots more to be done, but well done by you and many other advocates who continue to push for that. A system is never perfect. We have to stay on top of it all. Great to have you with us today, Dr. Janine Hubbard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.